Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this week's podcast. This week, I wanted to interview a lovely client of mine who is in a short term. She's a therapist. She works with people who are suffering from anxiety mostly, but I will let her do most of the talking in regards to what she does and how she does it. And we got into quite a lot of things. This is a bit of a longer episode, but I think it's a lot of value in here. And we talk about, how her and I met and, how that work experience was. And also, some mindset changes, which I think could be valuable for those of you who are struggling or having difficult times. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let the interview play out. But thank you so much for coming back this week, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And if you did enjoy this episode and would like to see next week's, make sure to be subscribed to the channel. And I will see you very, very soon.
So my name's Caroline Kavanagh, and my business is Caroline Kavanagh. That makes life very easy. My area of speciality is I work with people who struggle with anxiety. So I'm a therapist. And as I said, working with anxiety, we live in a stressful world. So it's something that everyone is exposed to in some different shape or form. And the way our minds are wired means that different things create anxiety in different people. So, I absolutely love what I do because no 2 days are the same. Everyone that I work with is totally unique. And the wonderful thing is everyone can learn something to use their mind in a different way to reduce the impact of that external stress on their experience of that world.
Since you started, because I know personally you've been doing it for years and years and years and years and years,
Mm-hmm.
but have you found...
Not that old. Back off. Not that many years. Enough.
You have enough experience to be able to do it well. I'll put it that way.
Live with that.
Anyway, have you found that your approach when you started was very different to the approach you have today or moving forward as well? Have you found your sort of approach has changed in the respect to how you actually help people?
Absolutely. And one of the fascinating things about the area I work in is it's an area of science that is just absolutely exploding. The understanding of how the mind works it's almost like daily. There's something like, never realized this used to happen. So, even 10 years ago, it was generally accepted that the brain was hardwired and you couldn't change it. So if, for example, someone had a brain injury, like a stroke, that part of the brain was dead. But it's now the new area in neurology, it's termed as neuroplasticity, and it's almost like imagining the brain is plastic, is like plasticine. It can be remolded. So, and it's something that's very close to my heart because my brother, who I was very, very close with, had a stroke 20 years ago, and the doctor then said he'll never walk, he'll never talk. He's doing both because other areas of his brain have compensated for the parts that are now dead. And that just creates this almost as boundless area of what the brain can do. And then going on from neuroplasticity, there's another area called epigenetics. They're all sort of big words, but in very simple terms, it means that there's now a belief or an understanding that the way you think can actually turn on or turn off your DNA. Again, it's not about we're hardwired. Your DNA means you're always going to have brown eyes or blue eyes. Yes, you are. But how you actually see things, depending on how those different genetic combinations are either fired or deadened down, can again make your whole experience of life totally different. And for me, that is just so exciting.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, I think that for me, I've found the more as I've pushed myself and the more I push myself outside my comfort zone, whether that's professionally or personally, I've found that it's like a muscle. In the respect to the more I do it, the stronger my brain becomes. The more I can do, and the more I'm able to do in that respect as well. Have you sort of seen that either with people you've worked with or yourself in the respect to the more you, I guess, in some ways experiment or the more you push yourself mentally?
And I think the sort of the idea of a gym is a really great kind of metaphor that, if you go to a gym once and do a press up, then your biceps really don't change very much. But if you go to the gym every day and you do a press up, you'll see a change. If you go to the gym every day and every day you do an extra press up, You'll then get to the point where actually doing press-ups doesn't make any difference anymore. So you put your feet up on something, and then you end up doing handstand press-ups. There is almost no bounds as to how you can keep extending yourself and making yourself mentally stronger. And I'm still very much on that journey. The more I learn and the more I exercise my own mind, it almost becomes the more there is to learn. And again, that just I find so exciting, so fascinating that I certainly haven't come across any boundaries yet that mean I've come to the end of that journey.
And I mean, talking personally, I don't think that you'll ever will come to that journey. I think that you'll just be, on that process for the rest of your life.
Yeah, one of the things I talk a lot about, it's almost going the other way, that in many ways our brains are still very similar to when we lived in caves as a primitive Neanderthal man. That fundamental instinct, which comes back to anxiety, to fear, is fight or flight. If our brain perceives danger, it creates a whole chemical response in your body, the sweaty palms, the palpitations, all of those things. When people say, I've got anxiety, those are the symptoms that they're recognizing. That's still part of us being primitive man. But as we've moved forward, and now we've got bricks and central heating and things that mean that the threat of, a saber-toothed tiger jumping up in front of us isn't as key. Our physiology has changed. So, we're a lot less hairy now, but our brains are still fundamentally the same, but how we use them is different. Neanderthal man didn't worry about what was going to happen in a month's time. He was just worried about now. And that's where I think, again, a lot of anxiety, and we've seen such an escalation in relatively recent times, is because as individuals, we spend so much time either thinking about the past, worrying about what has happened, or worrying about the future, what's going to happen. And that's where mentally, actually, if we reverted back to living in the moment like our Neanderthal friends were, we'd live a much calmer life, because whatever's happened is gone. You can't do anything about it. Whatever's going to happen isn't here yet. And if you worry about it, what you're actually doing is draining your resources. So if, for example, that saber-toothed tiger did pop up, you're actually less able to deal with it because you've drained your resources worrying about it. And this is where, the very present topic or word that a lot of people band about, mindfulness, is all about. It's just coming back to live in the moment. What's going on right now, because that's what you can influence, that's what you can deal with, that's what you can control. And control is the antipathy of anxiety. So anxiety is purely a reaction to vulnerability. So if you feel in control, you're not vulnerable. And so all of these things start to blend together.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. And personally for me, when I made that distinction between, there's planning for the future, and there's looking at the past and learning from the mistakes I've made or may have made.
Yeah, absolutely.
But whenever I've, said, well, I can only affect what I do today, right? I can actually change what I do today, right? Like me making the decision to record this podcast now is a decision I've made, right? Mm-hmm. What I do the rest of the day is a decision I'm going to make, right? Yep. But that's as far as I can control, right? Mm-hmm. I can then, but when we're in tomorrow, I can then control what tomorrow is and what I do in tomorrow. So, personally for me, and I'm sure we'll come on to lockdown a little bit more, but a lot of what I did was I asked myself at the end of the day, did I give today everything I possibly could have done? Did mm-hmm. I personally do everything I could have done, whether that's professionally or personally or whatever it is? Did I give my all to that day? At the end of the day, and if I can, answer, 6 out of 7 and say yeah, then that's great. But by no means does that mean you have to be 6 out of 7, right? Because there's weeks where I'm 4 out of 7 or 3 out of 7, right? Yeah. As I'm sure everyone has, but I think it's overall, if it starts averaging out to where you have more 6 out of 7 weeks than you have 3 out of 7 weeks, you're then going to be more likely to be able to pursue wherever you want to go. So whether that's where you want to go professionally, or whether you want to go personally, or whether or a mix of the both in that respect. Have you seen in some, building off that, have you seen a real change in how you've had to go about your business because of the restrictions and because of lockdown and because of, COVID in this kind of age that we're in now?
Yeah, there's definitely some changes being made. So the vast majority of my clients that I saw before lockdown would come and visit me in my practice. So obviously, as soon as lockdown started, then that stopped straight away. I had done some sessions online. I've got a few clients that live overseas, but they were typically people that I'd already known, already built that rapport with. So I was comfortable perhaps with doing hypnosis remotely because I felt in tuned and confident with working with that person. But suddenly I was thrown into the sort of arena. Do I now, kind of almost break my own rule of saying I'm not going to work with people online because I can't actually hold their hand if they need it to be held. And actually, what's been proven is the sessions online are as effective as if they were here with me. So it has literally made my business that was pretty much within the confines of Wiltshire. People would travel. I mean, most people travel with up to an hour's journey to come and have a session with me. Now it's global. If you can speak English, I can work with you. And that's really exciting. I mean, the honest answer is I still prefer to have people with me because I love having that instant feedback and not just looking at someone through a screen. But it now gives me the option to do both. It's put another sort of string on the bow, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, that was going to be my follow-up question. Do you think there'll be, when we're back to new normal or normal or whatever, whatever that ends up actually being, do you think there'll be kind of standing or things that you'll keep on doing that you did during lockdown, just as a add-on, in that respect? So you might have a kind of more global arm in the respect to you work with some clients that are in America or in New Zealand or in France or in Germany or wherever. In that respect, do you think that's something that firstly you'll do, and secondly that you're kind of in some ways excited to explore as well?
Yeah, I'm certainly excited to explore this where this could go. Having that option to say to someone, yeah, look, I know you're in Bradford and that's a 5-hour journey for me, but yeah, if you want to work with me, then we can do that. And it gives people choice as well. It means that someone can, if they want to travel that journey and work with me face to face, then that's open to them. But it's not the only option. So the more options we have, the more people can choose what's right for them. And that's something that's really important to me in running a business. Is it's not doing what just suits me. Is if I've got someone that's very anxious. I mean, a great example would be if someone's got a real fear of driving, which is a real common phobia. I can now work with them really easily. Whereas before, a lot of the clients that I've worked with that phobia have to be driven to me, which means that someone else is sitting, down in the kitchen having a cup of tea. Maybe not such a bad thing, but it just gives more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. I think as well allows you to sort of, in some ways, allow you to scale a lot better, personally, because in some ways, you can optimize your time a lot better in the respect to, like, say, for example, a session was an hour long on average, right? You can, in some ways, kind of instantly not have that or as much downtime in between sessions. Of course, if you would want to do that, but from what I've seen anyway, and how I see it anyway, in that respect, because you don't have to be that. Because I imagine if you have people come into your practice, there will be this kind of, you have to do scheduling, so there isn't going to be necessarily a situation where, if you overrun or if they're late or etc., there's going to be like a client coming when a client's leaving and etc.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's something that I've always been very aware of and worked hard to avoid, because one of the key things about my work, obviously, is privacy. And especially in the village that I work in, I've worked with a lot of people in this village, but no one knows I've worked with their neighbour unless they've actually told them. So I've always worked very, very hard to respect that anonymity if people wish it. But you're absolutely right. By doing that online, it takes that even slight risk away altogether. But one of the things that's also been really, really beneficial is I do quite a lot of work with teenagers. And so, again, teenagers, especially if they're anxious, coming to an environment that they've never been in, sitting in front of this, mature woman that they've never met before, could be enough of them a barrier for them to say, no, I'm not going to do it. Whereas now I can say to them, look, we're just going to have a chat over Zoom. If you think, I'm some, woo-woo, joystick wielding weirdo, you just turn your screen off. It's absolutely fine. I won't take offense of that. And so, again, it gives them exposure to actually learning more about hypnotherapy, the work that I do, and how it could help them in a way that they feel more comfortable. Because most teens, again, they're totally comfortable on social media, but they're losing that skill of actually interacting face to face because they don't even do it in their own classroom. I've got 2 teenagers myself, and I've experienced my daughter and her friends sitting in the back of my car texting each other rather than actually talking. That's how they communicate. So it gives me another way of working with an audience that I'm actually passionate in working with in a way that suits them, which again is just brilliant.
Do you think that you'll kind of develop in some ways in some ways something that was jumped to mind is like, for example, you're taking on to work with a new teenager, for example, and you may start with, right, let's jump on Zoom, let's have a chat, let's do a couple of sessions via Zoom. And then eventually, obviously, this would be post-COVID and when we're through this period, but, I can see it as a way where you sort of warm them up to the idea of working with you through Zoom. And then there may be situations where you would prefer or they would prefer or both that you then work in person.
I think as we mentioned before, it becomes an option. If that particular individual says, I quite like doing sessions with Caroline in the comfort of my own bedroom where I know I'm safe, then if that's what they want to continue doing, we continue to do that. If they actually think, I actually quite like this woman now, I wouldn't mind going and meeting her, then that becomes an option. If they want to do all the sessions face-to-face, that's an option. So it just creates this wider flexibility rather than me saying, okay, this is my shop, this is what I sell. And if you don't want that, then don't come in.
Yeah.
I can now say, well, you can have this shop, or you can have this shop, or you can have this shop.
Yeah.
So they can choose what works for them.
No, definitely. How have you found, because I know you've done some, advice webinars and bits and bobs during lockdown. How did you find that process from your side?
Yeah, it's an area of my business I've been looking to expand anyway, is doing more public speaking, because I just love talking about what I do. And the more people I can reach, for example, doing an hour's webinar, they may have, 100 people on it, means that 100 people can learn compared to just me working with one-to-one. When I first did the webinars, it was, I admit, a little bit tricky, because when you're not getting feedback from someone, it's almost like your mouth goes into overdrive. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm just talking, breathe. Because you're not getting that acknowledgement of people, especially on sort of a big audience like that, when all you can see is your own face in the screen. You think, I am sick of looking at myself. So that was a learning curve. But I did a series of 3 for a local organisation. And certainly looking back on them, each one was getting better. So that's great learning for me. My confidence in doing webinars has grown. So again, it's another string to the bow that I can continue to do that. Honest answer is I would, again, prefer to be on a stage in front of people that I can actually see them smiling, nodding, get them involved. But the more strings there are, the more there is that I can do to help people.
How did you? Because I think in some ways it would be interesting to also hear from you how you found how we met, firstly, and then how our first project actually was. Obviously, this was post COVID. Past COVID. But I think for me anyway, it'd be very interesting to hear kind of how you found that process from your perspective as well.
Of working with you,
yeah, and then firstly how we actually met and how that connection was made, because I think that's important to a lot of people, because I get questions all the time, how do you develop more clients, or how do you grow your business in that respect. So firstly, what was that process like from your side, and then secondly, how was the sorry to cut you off, but how the actual process of going through the production was, and then a little bit on what that production was, or productions.
So I guess for me, it would be the same for most people. I recognised, I had a need. I was wanting to do more speaker appointments, and therefore I was trying to get some footage of me doing professionally shot footage rather than sort of my camera stuck on the desk somewhere, of me doing speakers to have that show reel available. So all I did was just speak to people in my networks, friends and colleagues. And, Brunton Media was a name that kept coming up. Something that's really important to me, and this is one of my personal idiosyncrasies, is I really want to work with people that I have a connection with. I don't care if they're the best videographer in the world. If I don't click with that person, it's not going to work. So I think what I did is I just gave you a call. I caught you at a really bad moment because I think you were about to go into a meeting, but you just kind of said, look, brilliant, thanks for the call. I will call you back. And, it may be a little bit skeptical, but you hear that a lot, that people say, yeah, I'll call you back. And 3 days later, you're kind of thinking, oh, but literally you called me back an hour and a half later, your meeting had clearly finished. We had, a good conversation. But one of the things that seemed to come across to me is you had the same view in that you wanted to work with someone that you enjoyed working with. It was almost like, rather than me telling you what I wanted, you were asking me what I wanted. It wasn't you were taking the control of, well, what do you need? How can I serve? And then it was very much, well, let's just meet for coffee. So we met up in one of the Salisbury coffee shops, and I just spoke about me. And I think what for me put the big tick in the box that yes, you are the right person for me to work with is all the time you were thinking, but yeah, if we do that, then that can do this, and I can create this for you. And what about this? And what about that? So you were looking to how could you add value to my business, actually repurposing the video that I was wanting you to do. So, I felt that there was that you had a genuine interest in helping me in my business. I wasn't just another client that was going to generate a, £500 invoice for you. And that to me was important, that you were looking to add value and help me, because that's the way that I want to work, really, in partnership with people. And how can I help you? And hopefully some of the things that I've done since the project, we've had that reciprocation and things that I've done that you can use too.
No, definitely. And I think that's important for people to understand, that it's not just especially when you work in a field like ours, it's not just a transactional agreement, right?
Yeah.
Of course, there is conversations about a transactional part of the agreement, of course, but at a base level, it's not. It's, from how I see it anyway, it's I'm looking for clients now, especially anyway, that I can work with long term, that I can build a relationship with, and I can build long term. And to be honest, if someone only wants a one-off video, to be honest, I will recommend them to someone else, because I don't want those. And it's not that I don't want those clients. It's just, for me, if I can't go into depth on what you actually want to achieve in 4 years or 5 years, then I can't serve you the best way I feel I can serve you, if that makes sense. From my side. So it's really interesting to hear. It's why I like to kind of throw in that question, because for me, I think it's really important, for me anyway, from a growth perspective, to also understand, okay, well, what am I doing right? But then what can I be doing better on? Yeah. Right?
And I think for your listeners and for your potential clients as well, it's recognizing, there are lots of people out there that can shoot good video, just the same as there are a lot of therapists like me that can help you change. But what is really going to make the brilliant product, the brilliant outcome, is having that rapport, that relationship that's right for you. If you just want a transactional relationship, come in, do what's on the tin, bugger off, then that's fine. There are people that will do that. Whereas for me, that's absolutely not what I want. I want someone that is going to have an interest in my business, and to form a relationship, a long-term partnership. I'd love to think that in 10 years' time, you're still going to be doing videos for me. Because by that time, you're going to know me so well, I'm going to know you so well, it will just be easy. Yeah. Let's make life easy.
Yeah, there won't be a situation like, for example, the more projects we do, I see it in a way of, you know, I will know what styles you like. I will know what things work for you and your business. So we won't have to have a conversation about them because we will have already gone through all those hurdles 3 projects ago, 2 projects ago, 1 project ago, you know, in that respect. So I think
you also know that if I'm not on my top game, you can say, Caroline, that was crap. Let's do it again, because you know I have the capacity to do better because you've seen it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that being, and I've said this in previous content, but I think being comfortable with, you know, having a relationship where I know I can say my true opinion in the respect to, if I think your performance is shit, I will tell you your performance is shit, right?
And you did.
You know, at times I go, and there's times in shoots where, you know, at the start I was like, is this going to cost me a job doing this? But then I was like, I don't care if it does, to be honest, because they're not going to be happy with the product if I'm not happy with the product. If that makes sense, you know, like when they watch it back, they're going to go, my performance could be better. But if I can see the problem there, let's fix it now instead of having to fix it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks when you actually see the final video, you know, or the final product in that respect as well. So I think that's really important. I think it also comes back to working with the right people. Right. And you personally will only know who those right people are, you know, because
I think you may remember when we were doing the second video, Carlton had me driving onto my drive. Unfortunately, where I live is like a little short triangle, so I kept driving around, and he was doing this particular shot. And I think I must have driven around my triangle a dozen times. And every time I drove onto the drive and sort of looked through the window, he'd go, no, another time. It's like, oh. And there was a point in me thinking, oh, come on, it's good enough. But clearly it wasn't. And as I did the next circuit, I thought, no, I want it to be the best that he believes it can be, because that's what I'm paying for. If he thinks it can be better, then I'll drive around that triangle once more so it can be better. Because why would I not? Why settle for good enough if there is another level that you can go to? And actually, you know, I admire you for risking annoying me, saying, no, I want you to do it again, Caroline, because that means that the video was the best that it could be.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important to firstly, like, come to a peace with yourself within yourself, right? If you're going to do that from a business perspective, you need to be okay to know what risks you're willing, or risks, whether there was actually a risk there, who knows, right? I don't personally think there was actually a risk there. But, you know, for me, especially as this is the first project with you as a client, it's important I get that right. So that's part of the reason why I did it in the first place. Because if I leave a lasting impression and you know, feel that that project was as good as it could have been, you know, and you weren't sat there, you know, a week after going, oh, I wish we had done X, Y, and Z, or why didn't he see that, or why didn't we notice that, or, you know, whatever. But I also think that's something in some ways that you can it can get in the way. I think there's a point where it's like, yeah, you should reshoot something if you think a different idea, or you can try a different way. But I also think that going to the point of absolute perfection is also not necessarily the best to do either, because then you're not, you know, done is better than absolute perfect.
It's interesting you say that, because it's one of my little bugbears. There is, I believe, no such thing as perfection. It's just an abstract concept. My perfection is different to your perfection. Therefore, it's not real. It is just a concept. So what I tend to focus on is it the best it could be in that moment? You know, so the day we were doing that shoot, it was a beautifully bright summer day, but it was a nightmare to do because of that bright sunlight. And, you know, a cloud would come across and suddenly you'd go from this brilliant sunlight to shadow. So, you know, you were never going to get whatever perfection could have been. But in that moment, it's reshooting it to say, right, we're in 2 seconds of shade. Let's do it while that light's consistency. That is the best it can be in that moment. Therefore, again, coming back to my world of anxiety and risk, there is no risk if it's the best it can be.
I mean, there's definitely room to be said, like, right, okay, we've done this project, but this is the things I personally learned from it, and this is the things you may have learned from it. So let's add those into the next one to do it better then. So then there's that kind of progression, you know, in that respect. So for whatever the next project may be, it's going to be better than the previous, you know, for whatever reason. Obviously, only things we can control, but, you know, for whatever reason, it's going to be better than the previous. You know, for whatever reason, obviously, only things we can control, but, you know, for whatever reason, it's going to be better than the previous. You know, for whatever reason, obviously, only things we can control, but, still things we can tweak, things we can tune and really dial in what works, what you like as well from a style point of view as well. I think that's important to understand as well. But
one of the things that I was really pleased from is the first video that Carlton did for me was videoing a talk that I was doing at Wiltshire Council. And I had asked him, I said, when we're wrapping up, can you just grab the guy that booked me and just get a quick testimonial? Well, Carlton didn't just get a quick testimonial, he got a full-on interview with him. And that turned into a whole range of sound bites that I could use. But then spontaneously he said to me, Caroline, let me just do a quick interview with you. And I was still so buzzing that we captured about a 3-minute short video that's had more watches on YouTube than anything else, because the energy I was just exuding, having been on my feet for an hour, was brilliant. And I just really respect that you saw that moment and went, wow, here's a good opportunity. Just stuck a mic in front of my mouth and said, Caroline, talk. And that's the kind of thing that, again, it's lovely to know that you will take the opportunity not just to do what I asked, but actually to say, I can recognize an opportunity. Let's just go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it, but it also comes back to that kind of in the very early stages of us talking about possibly working together, we, whether it was like passively or not, sort of built a trust, right? Mm-hmm. Where we understood the boundaries between each other. We understood what is my role, what is your role, right? So once those boundaries are there, it allows me to really say openly to you, because I know I can feel comfortably to say openly to you, like if your performance was crap, or I think we should do this and this is why, right? I think that's really important. I think that's where quite a lot of videographers don't necessarily push as hard as they probably should, because to them it's just a job, right? To me, it's creating something which serves the purpose, which that's why I always ask the client, what do you want it to do first? Before we even talk about how to do it, what to do, etc. What do you want it to do? Right? At a core, what is the message? What do you want it to actually do? What does it want? What do you long term want it to gain you or get you? It might be something simple like I want it to give me more revenue, or I want to get more clients, or etc. Right? Or this is how I want to come across. Because then I look at it from a perspective of, okay, well, this is what I'm trying to strive towards, and it might be 2 or 3 projects before we actually get to that, but that's when I can have that gut feeling of go, right, I need to grab Caroline right now to have that interview, because you're not going to feel that way again unless you do another talk. But then it'll be a different feeling. It won't be that feeling. You'll never feel that feeling in that moment again, right? If I miss that moment, I've missed it.
Yeah.
So that's why it was important for me to go, right, let's do this now and just go with it. And if we don't use it, we don't use it. You know what I mean? So for me, it was kind of just, what have we got to lose? Let's film it, see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I have an extra video on my camera. You know what I mean? Like, best case scenario, it's something else we can use to help you kind of quote unquote sell you as a speaker, right? Yeah. And what you want to do. I think I asked you early on, what's your 5-year plan as a speaker? What's your, in that respect? Because I think that, and again, as I say, like having all your decision making with that in mind is always why you'll be able to actually get closer to it every time. Because everything is calculated then. There's risk, but there's a calculated risk, right? I think that's really important. How have you found, because I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to take this time where they're either looking at their 9-to-5 job, or they may possibly made redundant, or etc.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will think, I actually don't want to do what I was doing or are doing. I want to start X company. I want to do XYZ. I want to try and get a job as the, right? Or possibly even go out on their own. What advice would you give from your experience with starting businesses and working with possible other people who start businesses as well? Would you give to those people who are looking to go out on their own?
I've been made redundant twice. And I now, when people say, oh, I've been made redundant, my instant reaction is brilliant, because you now have got a completely blank sheet of paper to do whatever you want to do. And it comes back to, again, is you choose how you see the world. You can see redundancy or the current situation as a threat and be worrying about your mortgage, all of those things, or you can see it as an opportunity to now create a life of choice. And it's not, undermining the practicalities. Yeah, we all have to eat. We all have bills to pay. And that would be my advice to everyone, because I've started a number of businesses. This is second career for me. Um, is have whatever is for you your safety net, whether that's 3 months worth of mortgage payments, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is. Do whatever you need to do to get that money put aside so you have that breathing space that you don't need to worry about your bills. And know that, worst case scenario, if your dream doesn't work out, there is always employment out there. You can always go and stack shelves in Tesco's. I have done some, pretty basic jobs. And I'm not embarrassed to say that I've cleaned, industrial houses and things like that to earn money, to put aside, to mean that I then have that threshold to go out and do what I want to do without worrying about that month's bills. And once you've got that safety net, then jump, because you're not going to fall. So many people will teeter on the edge of that cliff for years, and worst case scenario, for their lifetime, because they're just scared to jump. Staying where is the comfort zone. And it's one of these things, again, we talk about a lot. Comfort zone doesn't mean it's comfortable. It's almost like the wrong terminology. What a comfort zone actually means is you understand how it works. You understand the rules. Whereas outside of your comfort zone is going outside of how you know how it works. Yeah, and that's where risk comes into place. But what I do when I work with people is saying, okay, you only have to go a little bit outside your comfort zone. And very, very quickly, your comfort zone suddenly expands, because you understand what the rules are in this new world. And the reality is, we have all gone out of our comfort zone time and time again. As a 4 or 5-year-old, the first time you went to primary school, you went outside your comfort zone, because your comfort zone was being at home with mummy. When you went to secondary school, another big one. Your first day at work, another big one. The first date you had, another one. We go outside our comfort zones all the time. But suddenly there gets to this one where you go, oh, I can't do it anymore. Rubbish. Yes, you can. You're just not being pushed to this time in the same way as you were through the school system. But you have that skill set. So trust it. And I love nature. I spend a lot of my time out in the outdoors, because you can learn so much with nature, and just watching how animals interact. And this is a great time. There's lots of fledgling birds at the moment. If the bird stayed in the nest, it would die. It gets to the point where the mum actually kicks it out the nest and it flies, because that's what it needs to do. And so, bringing this all together, get to the edge, have your safety net underneath you, but then jump and trust that you will fly. But even if it doesn't quite go right, you have your safety net to catch you. You're not going to get hurt. In which case, climb back up the lift, or climb back up the, whatever it is you jumped off the hill, work out what you can do differently, readjust your wings, get another safety net in place, do it again. And keep going until you do fly. If you did any sort of analysis of the top, performers in the world, the Richard Bransons, all of those people, they've all crashed. They've all hit their safety net several times, but they've got up and done it again. So the threat, my personal definition of failure is to not do anything. Because when you do nothing, nothing changes. When you do something, you've grown. And you've either learned the right way to do it, or you've learned the way not to do it, in which case you've learned to do it differently. There's always learning. And that can be a major leap, or it can be a baby step. But you do 10 baby steps, you've moved a long way from where you started.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it kind of becomes, I know for me anyway, it becomes very, now very instinctive, right? When I run into a problem, it's not like because there's still stress there, but it's now more of a situation where I'm like, right, okay, let's go down the process of what could be, like, for example, when a camera breaks. Right, let's go down the process and let's troubleshoot what's wrong with this camera, right? Sometimes camera still ends up broken when I go down the list, right? But at least then I, because I've done it enough to know, right, it's either this, or it's this, or it's this, or it's this, right? And if I get to that point, then the camera's just broken. There's nothing I can do to fix it. So then how do I fix the problem that camera breaking caused, right? And I think it comes back to, in some ways, being honesty. For me, at the time of filming, I had this exact problem happen. I was on a shoot. Everything was fine. I was filming. Suddenly my camera stops filming. It cuts off, right? Screen goes white. I'm like, right, okay. How do I resolve this problem? I troubleshoot the camera, still broken, right? But then it turns out that it may have only cost us, we were filming 4 episodes of the thing we were filming that day. It may have only cost us 1 episode because I was up front with the people I was working with and say, look, this thing happened. It may mean this. We now, before we start the next one, we need to find a solution to this problem. It was lucky because the people I was working with were photographers. So she ran upstairs, grabbed her camera. There you go. Job done, right? But for me, that's like the sooner example. This happened like 3 days ago. And for me, it was like, okay, that's a problem. But, because you can't necessarily, there's some things you just can't control. Like when that camera decided it wanted to die, there's nothing I could have done to stop it from dying or dying, right? All I could have done was, how do I tackle that problem? That's what I can control. And it comes back to what you can control in that respect. And kind of allow yourself to, and the more you do that, the more you'll get comfortable with things not going to plan and be okay with throwing out the plan and rewriting it or thinking on your feet and having those instincts. And I think that it's really important, especially, and as you go further in your career as well, moving back to the kind of jumping off the cliff analogy, I think that for me, for example, I was like, great, even if I can just be full-time for 6 months, I will grow a huge amount, and it might mean I then have to go and get another part-time because the money isn't there, right?
Yeah.
But those 6 months will have been enough for me to propel myself, so the next time I take that leap, I can continue doing it for probably a year, right? Or whatever it may be, if that's what ends up happening. And there's also situations, especially in video production, I'm sure you have a similar thing, where do I want to go and get another part-time and sacrifice the time that it takes to do that? But then I have this extra, whether it's an extra safety net with money, or whether it's, for example, in my case, I need to buy a new camera or I want to buy a new lens to up what I'm offering in respect to how I'm offering, and then there's this balance between, do I value at this point right now my time or what I can potentially spend my money on, right? In the respect to, from just a very, very simple perspective, from video production standpoint, how can I make my videos better by investing in a new lens, a new camera, etc. In that respect. So, but I think it's also being okay with failing as well, I think is the key thing. And understanding that the world doesn't end if you fail once or twice or 3 times or 4 times or 5 times or 6 times.
There's a technique that I talk about a lot with people that gets applied to different situations, and it's just simply called flip it. So it sort of started off with, a lot of people say, well, what if this happens? And when you flip it, you go, well, what if it doesn't? What if my camera breaks? What if it doesn't? What if I get made redundant? But what if you don't? Because the brain will automatically answer whatever question you're asking it. So if you focus on a negative, you're going to go down that negative spiral. If you flip it and focus on a positive question, your brain will go on a positive spiral. It's not choosy. It will just go wherever you direct it. But coming back to to flipping it from what you were just saying there, I would often say to people, if they said, for example, well, I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to buy another camera. I would flip it and say, well, can you afford not to? Yeah. So I often think to myself, I recently invested in a coaching program myself. So, I coach people, but I just think, well, that's where's my integrity if I'm asking people to come to me for their self-development, but I'm actually not investing in my own self-development beyond what I can do in just reading books. So I've just invested in a program that's 4 figures at a time where I'm not earning that. But it is, well, this is an opportunity. And if I'm actually, what's the cost to me of not jumping on this program when it was being offered at the price that it was? And I will find the money, because to me, the cost of not doing it was greater than the pounds and pennies cost of having that money just sitting in my bank and not doing the program. And again, choice. It's making the choice and deciding what is best for you. And it's really important to me, it's not for, I think, any of us to sit there and say, you should be doing this. I don't say to any of my clients, you must. It's just, well, here's some choices. Which choice is best for you? And my role is to perhaps introduce to you some choices you hadn't thought about, position them in the way that you hadn't looked at before. It's what I call one of those aha moments. And we've all had them when you go, oh, I really didn't see it that way. Like putting on a new pair of glasses and suddenly what you thought was in focus is suddenly now really in focus, because something's just given you a little bit of a change direction.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think that's really important to understand, because that was not a perspective I had necessarily thought of. I think I kind of, in some ways, I executed on it, but didn't necessarily think about it. But I think that's an important thing that anyone should take away if they're going to take anything from this podcast is, what is your, in some ways, opportunity cost or cost for not doing something? For example, in my case, I had to find a way to buy a new camera. In theory, I didn't have to. I still own 2 cameras that work completely fine. However, I have projects that require 3 cameras, right? And I require to do certain things that require certain, specs of camera. So I was like, well, yes, it's a financial hit now, but do I think I'm going to make more money from that piece of equipment before it dies? Because at the end of the day, every piece of equipment will die, right? Just from basic terminology, if you use a piece of equipment for long enough, it will die, right? It's just about when it will die. And have you paid off that piece of equipment and made its value again, possibly even again, from that piece of equipment? And I think in most cases, the answer is going to be, yes, I have. And that's a personal thing. And that's a professional thing that only you can know from your instinct perspective of what's good to do, but you're also able to and are willing to accept the consequences of that decision, whether they're good or bad.
And coming back to your original question around people considering going out on their own or changing the career. Again, I'm not all about just, throw caution to the wind. Risk is real. And so coming back to have that safety net that's real for you, but then looking at it from what's going to be the cost to you of not exploring that new opportunity, of not trying to go out on your own, of not getting a new job, because very, very few decisions are irreversible. If you try a business, you eat up all of your resources, then you can go back to getting a job, knowing that you've still got the skill sets that you had 3 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever it may be. But then you go back to that job feeling much more confident that this is the right job because you've tried something else and it didn't work. Yeah. So you've minimized the risk. And again, another thing that I quite often do with people is it's a bit of a morbid scenario, but saying, okay, just imagine you're on your deathbed. What would you be saying to yourself? And no one in my experience of doing this with people have said, oh, I'd be laying on my deathbed going, I wish I hadn't. They would all say, I wish I had. I wish I'd taken that opportunity. I wish I'd gone for that job. I wish I'd gone self-employed. Yeah. So again, whatever is a platform of risk that's acceptable to you, get that platform solid and then jump. Because the cost of not doing it is often going to be much higher.
Yeah.
The cost of staying where you are can be much higher.
No, definitely. I think for me anyway, personally, for probably the last year, I would say, I've had the mindset of, hopefully not, but what if today was the last day I have, right? I tried not to live with any form of regret. at all, right? Now, that's not easy to do if you just say that as a concept. I don't want to live with regret, right? But if you try to develop that as a core to strive for, you'll get to a point where you just make decisions. We don't even think, like, you've thought about the decision, you've done research on the decision, you know it's a good idea, but then you won't have that kind of, should I make this decision or not? Because you've already validated in your own head that it's a good decision to make, right? Like, for example, a real world example would be, which camera am I going to buy next? Since I have now broken a camera, it's an opportunity for me to upgrade a piece of equipment that I otherwise wouldn't, right? Because, you know, in that respect, it's this kind of balancing out, but it's, do I regret not doing it today if I don't do it today? I have an opportunity right now to get a camera that, in the camera case, that is really, really good for what I want it to do and is a perfect fit what I need it to do in comparison to everything else I do at a decent price or a good price. Am I going to regret not taking this deal if I don't take it today? And the deal will cease to exist in 3 days, for example. You know, now on the other side of that, do research, still make calculated decisions with those. You know, they're not reckless decisions, but there's a big difference, in my opinion, anyway, between making a decision which is a calculated risk than just, you know, then that you sort of remove some of the stuff that would stop you making that decision mentally to make that decision, and be like, well, I'm okay with the consequences, or worst case scenario, I have to make this work for the next 3 months, or that might have just cut, you know, talk about that safety net, that just cut 3 months of my time that I could have spent, but if I don't make any money, right? But am I willing to take that calculated risk, with the upside of it being, in likelihood, to be honest, the reality will probably be I may have a slow couple of months now, but by the time I get to a dicey area regarding money where I have to make a decision, I think it's probably very likely that I'll be in a position that I'm better than I was now. You know, in the respect to, I will have generated more revenue because of that decision, or because of the decisions that are made by that decision from a long-term perspective. You know, a lot of the decisions I make anyway personally are always long-term. You know,
and I guess it comes back to what we've mentioned a couple of times. Everyone is going to have their own individual perception of risk, based on their own circumstances. But what I would advocate people doing is not just looking at the cost of doing something; it's the cost of not doing it. It's that, look at both sides, flip it over. And that can often give you a really different perspective, and finding that the cost of not doing it actually creates much more anxiety than the cost of doing it.
No, definitely. Do you have a quote unquote action plan for kind of bringing your business back to the old normality? Obviously, it won't be, you know, I don't think ever the what it was, you know, in the respect to what it was before COVID. But do you have kind of a plan or a thing to really merge what you've learned during lockdown and the things you've wanted to establish during lockdown to then sort of move into the next phase of your business? You know, whether that's doing some Zoom client bits and bobs and then coming back to doing stuff in person, or are you still in that process of building that plan?
Yeah, I kind of go against all business advice in this, and there's probably going to be lots of people listening to this going, "Oh my goodness!" So I don't plan. I have a very, very clear vision of where I want to be. So I jokingly said to someone a few years ago, and then actually thought, "No, it's not a joke. This is what I want." One of the names that people are sort of involved in self-development are probably familiar with is Tony Robbins. You know, he is mega man, does some great things. And I jokingly said, I'm going to kick Tony Robbins off stage in my 4 heel stilettos because it's time for a female to do it. And I said it was sort of said jokingly. I went, no, I will be standing in front of an audience of £30,000 or 30,000 people talking about what I do. And so that's my end goal. How I'm going to get there, to be honest, I haven't got a bloody clue, because I don't want to control the journey. And my personal belief and experience actually is when you try and control the journey, there is something bigger out there. You can call it God, universe, whatever label you want to put on it, that says, nah, there's a better route here. And the way I sort of talk about this with clients is that if I want to go to Glasgow, all I need to know is I'm heading north from Salisbury. And it means that at every junction I come to, I take the one that's going to take me through north. I don't need to worry about what's going on in Oxford or Manchester or Leeds, even if they're on the route to Glasgow. I just know they're north. I just make the decision that comes along. And that allows me to be far more spontaneous. So when this guy popped up and said, Caroline, I'd love you to join my beta program for my annual, for my year's coaching, I just went, yeah, you're a really good speaker. I reckon I can learn a lot from you. I'll sign up. Had I been really fixed in I'm going to be doing this or this or this, I might have gone, no, that's outside of my plan. I'm not going to do it. I missed out on a great opportunity. I just looked at it and go, is that going to get me farther north? Yeah, I think it might. And I jump on that. And so, for me, that metaphor works really well. My end destination is so crystal clear, but I just enjoy the journey. And there might be a little diversion that comes off that in the long run may get me there quicker than by going on the motorways.
Yeah, exactly. No,
and
definitely.
To me, the plan is like forcing you down the motorways.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, as I say, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think it's, I think there's valid points on both sides to whether you should have a plan or shouldn't. And I think some things you should definitely plan, right? But I think that you also should be completely okay with the fact that you can tear up that plan and start again, right? And just go with your gut. And I've found personally, as I've gone through what I've gone through with business and as I develop in business, this podcast is a key example of it. Back in January, I said, I did a poll on my Instagram saying, would people be interested in me doing a podcast? The overwhelming majority said yes. So I was like, right, okay. No clue what this podcast is going to become. No idea that I would actually be then interviewing people on the podcast. I mean, it was obviously a thing I thought about, but at a core level of should I do a podcast, it was just me talking. Right? It was just me doing advice, doing this, and it's now become something that I never thought it would become. Mm-hmm. But I've also been in a situation where I'm also seeing now I'm starting to understand the benefits of doing a podcast in general, just simply to the fact of like a basic core business level. Does it actually bring me more clients, right? Am I putting all this time into this thing? And does it bring me more revenue or more clients or more attention? And the easy answer is yes. Yes, it does. Right? Now, how and why, I couldn't tell you. But the reason that like really, really made this clear for me, or really made this kind of tick box in my head was I was having a meeting with a client, right? Didn't mention the podcast at all, never came up, never even thought we were even going to talk about the podcast. And she mentioned the podcast and asked if she could come on the podcast, right? Which for me in my head was like, hold on, I might actually be onto something here with this podcast thing, right? Because it was like, right, and now I'm using it as in some ways a kind of value-adding asset to my clients, right? Because I can give them because completely selfishly, I need content, right? If I'm being honest, I need content. Mm-hmm. But also, it allows them to have a platform to talk outside of their own platforms about what they do, right? And from what I've seen anyway, it's been kind of this interesting development in the respect to I'm able to go into a long depth conversation about what they do for them to also validate that they know what they're talking about, but also it allows me to sort of in some ways passively advertise what they do. So in turn, it's very valuable to a client or to me as a brand, because for example, when you hire me as video, I think if we disagree, but I think you get so much more than just video. Mm-hmm. I'm not just a videographer, and for a while I didn't necessarily understand that I was doing that, right? Because I was just doing it, right? And that was just part of my process. But I think as I've really developed and looked at what I'm doing in lockdown, I've sort of found more that I'm a lot more than a videographer in respect to what I actually do. You know, I help with distribution, I help with concepting. In some ways, I help with business development sides as well, and areas there as well that I didn't necessarily feel I was, one, qualified to do, but also two, actually found that I really, really enjoy doing as well.
But I think that comes down to, you know, as we were talking before, it's about having a partnership approach. I think people people need to understand what you can do for them. It's like, I say, it's like you need to have a hook for people to hang their stuff up on. So you say, I'm a videographer, because they go, okay, I understand what you do. But then as the relationship grows, they understand you can do a lot more. It's just the same for me. You know, my hook is I'm an anxiety therapist, anxiety specialist. But yeah, I can also do weight loss for people. I can do phobias. I can do all sorts of things. But if I try and say I do all of these, people kind of go, well, I don't actually know what you do, because you seem to do everything. And so, you know, I think it is that I love working with people that struggle with anxiety. But if someone contacts me and says, look, I hear hypnotherapy is really good for weight loss, can you help me? The answer is yeah, absolutely. Because often people overeat because they're anxious. You know, they're all linked, but it's all about having that partnership approach with people, helping them in the way that they need helping. And if you can't help them, is having that integrity to say, look, that's not my ballpark, but let me introduce you to
X, Y, is it? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's really important to understand from a basic level, to know that, and also be okay with the fact that I may not be able to answer every question you have regarding marketing, for example. But in most cases, I probably know someone who knows it really, really well, right? Yeah. Like, I'll give you an example. If you said to me, oh, I love the video, but I would love to run it as a Facebook ad, I would go, right, that's a great idea. I have no clue where to start with Facebook ads backend. But however, I know such and such who does Facebook ads really, really well. So let's work as a triangle situation to say, well, okay, I can create the content, I can then hand it off to this person who then works with you on a one-to-one basis to say, well, this is why, this is the demographics of the ad we're going to do, or whatever, you know, in that respect as well. And I think understanding that and being okay with that, and developing connections and teams and people who can complement what you do is really, really important, because it allows you to sort of, in some ways, use their, or utilize their network as well. So everyone who they ever meet, if they're in a situation where, for example, someone who I may hire to do motion graphics, for example, right? And they get a conversation with someone who's looking to do video, hopefully I would have built a relationship with that person to then I get a referral through them in that respect, saying, oh, have you thought about talking to Colton about doing video because X, Y, and Z? You know, I think in your trade as well, it'd be very, very similar in the respect to, you may, and I actually know of a case, because you told me of a case where you were working with someone and you didn't feel, or they didn't feel, I forget which way around it was, but it was, I don't feel I can serve you the best way I feel you need to be served. However, I know this other person because he happens to be a client of mine, and I think you should talk to this person because I think his approach will help you better. Yeah, he needed a male role model. And so, you know, I thought, I've taken him as far as I can. He now needs this different approach. It's almost someone coming in from left field to take him off in a different direction. So, yeah, and I think that's really important to do for anyone in any business, is know where you're good, focus on what you're good, and know that there's other people that have strengths that your weaknesses, and don't be scared to pass them over, because then again, everybody grows, everyone benefits. Yeah, and then it's a win-win-win situation. But also I think that sometimes some people at the right time need going back to me telling you that your performance was not as good as it could be. Sometimes people need people around them when they're working to get the best result by saying sometimes it's shit, right? But you know for a fact, like for example, I would hope anyway that when I say your performance is shit, it's because I know for a fact that you can do better in that performance because I've seen it. Right, it might have been 2 minutes ago, or it might have been 2 months ago, but I know that you are personally capable of being able to execute that better from a come across perspective or whatever we're doing. So I think that and again, it just comes back to, I think it's conveniently nice that we've come full circle, but it's it's important to surround yourself with people, I think anyway, that are not afraid or not worried about saying when you're shit.
It's what I call term, and I talk about it a lot when I first meet a client. I practice what I call tough love. So even just yesterday, one of the women I was working with, she said, you're telling me things that I don't want to hear. Yeah, because that's my role. If I just told you what you want to hear, you might as well go and speak to your best mate, because that's what they're there for. I'm here to actually take you outside, back to that outside of your comfort zone, and tell you things, but it comes from a place of love. I'm telling you those things because I know that's what you need to hear to help you overcome the problem that you've got. And it's the same from your perspective. It's not just saying that was really shit, Caroline. It's you're coming from a place of love, knowing that I have the capacity to do it better. And so, again, it's your intention behind the work that you do that I think is so valuable and so important. It's, doing the best that you can through the people that you're working with.
No, definitely. I think that's really important to, and if you don't have to necessarily establish that kind of confidence from the start, right? Like, by no means did I have it, and I bet you didn't either, but it's something which you will develop through time, right? As you do more of whatever you're trying to do. So whether it's videography, or whether it's counseling, or whether it's, making balloon animals, right? You will develop what works and what doesn't, just in respect to your instincts will develop, and you'll sort of feel it. It's not like people ask me, oh, how do you know that a shot's going to be really, really good and work for the film? I'm like, I couldn't tell you. I genuinely cannot tell you how I put a film together nowadays, because it's so instinctive when I edit it that it's not you know what I mean? It's like this, I feel it. I don't think it, right? There's obviously thinking involved, but I feel when I put a film together. I feel my way through it and that's why I say at the start of a project, I have no idea how this is going to come out. I have absolutely no idea. Because in most cases, it develops from the first concepting stage all the way to when we come to the end and when it's delivery and when we're actually in the editing room, or I'm in the editing room, because we may have seen opportunities to make it better as we go along that process, from just a creative standpoint, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that sort of comes back towards what I was saying about my journey to Glasgow. That your end destination is a damn good video, but you're not controlling the route. You're allowing that to grow and develop through each second that passes, being able to react to anything that spontaneously happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or if one of us gets an idea on set and we have time to shoot it, just as a throwaway, we might use it, we might not. Sure, why not? Let's do it. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it doesn't. And then I've found anyway that some of the best shots that, from the client's perspective, love in the video are literally just ones where I have an idea, or they have an idea, or the photographer that we're working with has an idea, or etc. about trying something, right? And at the time, I have no idea if it's going to work. I have no idea if it's even going to go in the edit, but it then when I feel it out, it feels like the best at that, where that shot was placed, it felt like the best shot for the purpose of that video, whatever that video may be, in that respect as well. So I think that's really important to at least start developing that, or looking to start developing that from anything you do.
Trusting instinct. So many of us, again, as we sort of go back to that caveman relied on his instinct, whereas we've now become far more consciously dominant. And I always remember years and years ago, I did a self-defense course, and the guy started this course by saying, I've worked with thousands of women who've been attacked, raped. And he said, and every single one of them said they knew instinctively that something was wrong, but they talked themselves out of it. They allowed the conscious part of their mind to go, no, I'm being silly. Everything's fine. That's a really extreme case. But when you tune into your instincts, whether you want to call it your gut, whatever you sort of symbolize that feeling for, listen to it, because that's your subconscious mind, and it is so, so powerful. Trust it. Yeah. And don't hang on to the why, just go, okay, just trust. Because the thing that's bigger than any of us, I think, can understand is just giving you a bit of a nudge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think it's in some ways will be when you grow the most as well, because I found my instincts are really honed because now I actually strive for projects that I know that I'm actually scared about doing, right? Like, I'm like, this is terrifying, I'm gonna do it anyway. Or this is or that, whether that's like a finance perspective of like, there's how much on the line, hold on, or just this is a big deal client for me, in the respect to whether it's the terminology in the respect to the field they work in, or simply they are huge. For whether that's personally huge, or like social media huge, or whatever. Or, in that respect, it's a corporate client, do you know where these people work? That kind of thing. So for me, I think now I'm kind of striving for projects that I can really feel that kind of, that sinking feeling you get sometimes in your stomach, where it's like, this is really scary. Like genuinely scary, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I think the only reason why I've been able to do that, or the only reason why I'm able to do that, is because I've done it so many times. So there isn't as much, of course I'm scared, but I do it anyway, because I'm used to pushing myself in that respect. And I think that it's important, and you have to feel comfortable within yourself. As you were talking about earlier, I think you need to feel comfortable within yourself about how hard you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, right? I think that some people are able to, if they do it, because as you do it more, you'll be, more likely to push yourself further each time. Every step will be larger once you do it more. But if that means you have to start by taking, one step out and then jumping back in again, go for it.
And it's actually very common to misinterpret how anxiety and excitement feel, because they're very, very similar vibrations internally, with very, very similar outputs, your heart racing, your palms sweaty, all those things. And I remember years ago, I did a parachute jump, and a bit like you, I was absolutely terrified. I did this really emotional Facebook Live where I was just like, oh, I'm about to drop out of a plane. But I knew I was going to do it. And actually, when I look back on it, that feeling of fear was as much excitement, because I was really excited about this thing that I'd been looking forward to doing for months. And again, a lot of people say, I'm really anxious about this. And when we really unpack it, they're actually excited about it. But it's only, they're getting the two emotions confused because it's something new. And just sometimes, again, that's a really good thing to just take that stop, breathe, and go, am I really scared, or am I actually excited? Because this could be phenomenal. And don't confuse the two things. There might be a good mix of both of them in there, but that's okay. If it's 100% anxiety, listen to that, because that's telling you don't do it. But if there's a good old mix of excitement in there, go for it, because that's going to be your opportunity to grow.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's the same to be true with whether it's personally or professionally. For me, as I say, I think I said early on with when we were discussing possibly working together, I said, I'm looking for people that give me projects or I work with that are going to push me, right? In the respect to they're going to put me in a situation where I don't know every answer, right? That I can then grow from, right? And they're the kind of projects I'm really looking to take on nowadays. But also something that just jumped to mind was, I think that whenever it's a conversation of like, oh, let's meet for coffee and talk about what you do, also in some ways it's me vetting you in the same way, because I'm seeing, can I actually work with you? Is that, as you were saying earlier, is there that connection there? And however weird it sounds when it says like, oh, you're vetting your client, because surely they would be the kind of deciding factor, but it also needs to work for you, right? You also need to be fully aware that if you don't, like, for example, I think the example you gave early on was, if this guy's an arsehole, it doesn't matter how much he's going to pay me, I still don't want to work with him because he's an arsehole, right? But, it depends on where you are. Are you really, really strapped for cash and you need this job to, allow you to continue to pursue your quote unquote dream or build your business for another 6 months, right? Or whatever, or, is it in that balancing act? And there's some jobs that I think everyone takes where they grit their teeth and go, right, this guy's an asshole, but I need what he's paying me at this time, right? Or etc. But in most cases, especially as your demand grows, I find you can, not in a like horrible way, but I think you find that you'll just naturally pick and choose the projects you want to work on and the people you want to work with. But also for the goodness of the like from my perspective anyway, the goodness of the content, right? Because there's definitely, from what I've seen anyway, you can definitely tell if there's this kind of, I call it a robotistic kind of relationship where where everyone isn't pushing in the same direction. It's just kind of like a transactional video.
Automated.
You know, it's right. Okay, we're gonna do bam, 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 done. Right? There's no passion. There's no kind of spur of the moment. This is an idea randomly, or that in some ways intention to detail. You know, like what you were talking about, where you were driving around for probably more times than you wanted to. You know, those attentions to detail moments only happen because you genuinely care about the person you're working with, right? And about whether they're successful. And for me, I've only really tried to take on businesses or work with people who I want their business to be more successful than I am, right? And that's partly because if you're more successful, I become more successful. Because just natural affiliation, right? If I do good work and you then have a bigger platform, you're then going to talk to more people about why I'm so good at my job or not, right? But also, just from a finance perspective, if you're more successful, in turn, in most cases, you'll probably make more money, which in turn means you're probably more likely to pay me more, I would hope, at least, right? Or give me more projects, which in turn means I make more, if that makes sense, you know? So it's one of those things where if you focus on helping your clients become bigger and better and do bigger and better things and pursue their business forward, hopefully it will be reciprocal in that respect.
Yeah. And I'm in a very fortunate position now that I haven't done any active advertising for 3 years because all of the clients I get now are word of mouth. Because I work with enough people who have created the change that they want to, that as soon as they find their friend, you know, anxious, whatever it might be, they go, do you know, give Caroline a call. And that's, you know, a wonderful place to be. It takes a little bit of time to get there, but I believe you get there by just continuing to deliver the best that you can every time. Like you said, I think almost where we've done full circle, make every day the best day that it can be, because tomorrow's not here yet. Yesterday's already gone.
No, exactly. I think that's a nice point to end on, because I know that I'm sure I should probably do some actual work soon, but you know.
No, we can just carry on for hours.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely we can, 100%. But for those who may be interested, who don't know where to find you, who may be just stumbling upon this podcast, or you know, who haven't been part of my community since we've worked together, or more recently, where can people find you?
Yeah, the easiest thing is just my name. You know, Caroline Kavanagh. That will take you to the website, which is carolinekavanagh.co.uk. I'm active on Facebook. That's about the only social media that I do. But yeah, Caroline Kavanagh, just type that into a search engine and it will come up. And then you can contact me in whichever way you want. There's things on the website, obviously, Messenger, Facebook, good old phone. Now there's a concept.
No, don't be silly.
Yeah, don't be silly. Phone anymore, goodness me. Yeah, no, I'd love to talk to anyone. And, you know, the first conversations I have with anyone, they're always really informal. And it is very much about how we've been talking. It's just getting to know each other. And if I think I can help you, then I'll tell you how I think I can help you. If I don't think I can, I will refer you on to someone else. And it's always done in total confidentiality and from a place of love.
Cool. Anything else you want to mention? Go over a leaving message?
Oh gosh, God, make that short. I don't think I can. I guess what's the one thing that we've been talking about today is live for today. Yeah, make today the best it can be. Take that moment to just pause and listen to the birds, because there aren't so many cars on the road. Enjoy that moment. Enjoy that moment of peace, because in that moment of peace, that's when you hear inspiration. That's when that muscle that we call the subconscious mind is allowed to flex. And the more you do that, the more you flex that muscle, the more control of your life and how you direct it, you become less of a victim and more of the steerer of your own journey through life.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think that's definitely very true, and I think that when you are okay with understanding that you can only control a certain aspect of your life, it allows you to actually take a lot more control over your life as well.
You can only control yourself. You can't control anyone else. You can't control the environment. You control what you choose to see and do and feel and think.
Great. Anyway, I'm going to let you go because otherwise we'll be here for another hour. And however fun that may be, that this podcast has to end at some point. But thank you very much for coming on, Caroline. Words. This is why I shouldn't talk for this long.
That's why you do pictures. That's why you do pictures.
This is why I do video. I let other people talk because my mouth decides it doesn't want to let me speak at some point, especially when I've been talking for an hour. But thank you, Caroline, for coming on, and I hope you did enjoy it as much as I did. Thank you guys so much for spending the time and taking this time to listen and, enjoy the journey that was mine and Caroline's interview conversation. I hope you took value from it, and I hope you're going to live for the day or for today as we ended off that interview with. But yeah, just to give some context, this interview was filmed a couple of months ago. Just to give some context, it was just before shops were opening, or they just opened, I believe, anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to give you some context on where those won, but I've got some very, very exciting episodes coming in the next couple of weeks, and the podcast now from this point forward is actually going to be tweaking a little bit and going to be becoming a little bit more creative and a little bit more interesting in the respect to the topics that is discussed. But I hope there's still going to be a lot of value added to your life from these podcasts, and if you are enjoying them, make sure to be subscribed to the channel, and I would love to hear what you think in the comments section down below. And those of you who are coming back every week and enjoying these podcasts, thank you so much for the continued support. But I'm going to stop talking now. I'll see you on Wednesday for a brand new YouTube video, and yeah, have a wonderful day. I'll see you very, very soon.